Okay, welcome back. I hope you have got an idea about keywords in the previous chapter. So in this chapter, we will look at discussing the different data types we have in Java. We look at primitive data types, wrapper, classes, and also introduce you to the concept of a custom data type which can be used in Java programming. Data types in Java can be categorized as a three space here. So we have primitive data types, wrapper data types, and custom data types. So we'll explore these in this particular chapter. So let us look at primitive data types. So integer is a primitive data type. We have floating point numbers, characters, and Boolean. So what is an integer? So this is one of the whole valued signed number which is typically used in most of the programs that we use, and there are different sized data types for integer types, which basically represent both positive and negative numbers. For example, we have an 8-bit based byte which is useful for representing only an 8-bit character, for example. Then we do have short, which represents 16 bits, and most commonly used int, which is representing an integer which is of 32 bits. And finally, long is 64 bits integer. So this is a range that we see when we look at different integers for different bits. So primarily it represents 2 to the power of 8, 2 to the power of 16, 2 to the power of 32, and 2 to the power of 64. So that is what is the range represented in decimal. The second type of primitive data we use generally in programming is floating point numbers, which is nothing but numbers with a fraction precision which is there, fractional precision. And there are two types that would come into picture. Float, which is representing a 32-bit real number with fraction, and as well as we have a 64-bit number which is double. So these are the two types of floating point numbers we use in programming. And Java also support character type, which actually represents a 16-bit UTF type of character. So when you say 16-bit UTF, it represents all the languages as well. So all the symbols which are there is also represented. So right from the inception, Java stuck to UTF-16 because ASCII has limitations, and we have difficulties in representing all the languages and all the characters and symbols of all languages. And that is where UTF-16 is very useful, and it has a wide range with which all the languages are basically covered. So we have char, which is a 16-bit, and we have the range represented in this particular graphic. And finally, we have Boolean. So Boolean represent 0 or 1 in binary arithmetic. So we do see true or false representing 1 and 0 in Boolean primitive data type, which is basically used as well. And all these primitive data types also have an object representation in Java known as wrapper data types. So there are wrapper classes. For example, if you have a wrapper class called integer. So integer wrapper class actually encapsulates or wraps, just like an envelope, which wraps a letter, for example. Similarly, an integer wraps an int primitive data type. So representing a primitive data type as an object. So there are various methods which are exposed by the wrapper data type, and it could be useful especially so to perform various operations on the data which is encapsulated within that particular wrapper types. So we also use wrapper types in when we get into programming and other concepts in the later chapters. And there are various data types for wrapper, including like byte, short, integer, long, float, double, character, and boolean. So this might be giving you a hint that it is same as a primitive data type. So for every primitive data type in Java, there is a wrapper class available for object-oriented programming and representing some functions or methods within that particular data. What if you want to represent your own structure? For example, you want to represent say a student which represents a structure. Say for example, we may have a first name for the student, last name for the student, right? So date of joining a particular course, what are the courses which are enrolled by a particular student. So like that, there could be different structure, customized structure required in our day-to-day programming environment representing real-world entities. For this purpose, instead of using a primitive data type, which is not a very useful option, we do have a custom data type which can be basically used to represent custom structures that are required by a particular program. And these structures in an object-oriented program like Java represent real-world entities like a student, employee. We also used in the previous chapters called as rectangle. Right? Rectangle represents a rectangle as a concept which we know in our day-to-day mathematical world. So these are the custom data types which are also supported in Java. So with this, we come to the end of this particular chapter on data types. In the next chapter, let us do some hands-on and we'll just understand how to work with different data types and use different data types in a Java program.